Little did we realize that feeding one hungry traveler would change the rest of our journey. More than 150 years ago, a young girl named Philura recorded an encounter on the Oregon Trail that challenged many of the stereotypes we hear about relations between immigrants and Native Americans. Philura remembered that every evening the wagons were arranged in a defensive circle before the family went to sleep. One morning, after breakfast, her mother was packing food for lunch while everyone prepared to continue west. Philura noticed a native man moving from wagon to wagon. He appeared to be asking each family for something to eat. Everywhere he went, people turned him away. By the time he reached the Vanderburgh family, he had been refused again and again. When he reached their campsite, he pointed toward the fresh biscuits. Philura's father immediately told her mother to feed him. She served him biscuits, leftover pancakes, and sorghum molasses. The children gathered around to watch. Philura later remembered being surprised by how carefully and neatly he ate, even though he used his fingers. What amazed them most was simply how hungry he was. After finishing everything on his plate, he motioned toward the family's bread. Her mother brought it to him. He continued eating until nearly all of the lunch prepared for 10 people was gone. Only 2 biscuits remained. Then he asked if he could take 1 biscuit for his child. Her mother agreed. He covered it with molasses and tucked it inside his buckskin shirt. Then he asked for the last biscuit for his wife. Again, she agreed. Before leaving, he thanked the family, shook hands with both parents, and prepared to continue on his way. Before leaving, he carefully greeted every child in the family. He even made a point of greeting Philura's young cousin, Florence. Philura later wrote that he seemed to study each face as though he intended to remember them. At noon, the family laughed about the lunch they had given away. They joked that the man's wife and child would certainly enjoy those biscuits. Only much later did they understand why that simple breakfast mattered. Before we return to the trail, we need to understand what brought Philura's family west. Philura explained that the family had spent a difficult winter in Iowa. A letter arrived telling them that her oldest brother had been killed during the Civil War. Her parents wanted a fresh beginning. When relatives in Oregon described the opportunities waiting there, they sold the farm, packed 3 wagons, and headed west in the spring of 1864. Fort Laramie was crowded with soldiers, traders, immigrant wagons, and native people from many tribes. For young Philura, it was unlike anything she had ever seen. While the family was eating lunch, she noticed an important-looking native leader approaching with a group of warriors. At first, she didn't recognize him. Then her brother Winfield suddenly realized who it was. It was the hungry traveler they had fed weeks earlier. Gone were the man's worn clothes. In their place, he wore finely decorated buckskin garments and an impressive feathered headdress. Philura wrote that it was the finest native dress she had ever seen. When he noticed the family eating, he politely waited. Only after they had finished did he approach. He greeted each member of the family in turn, shaking every hand. When Philura's older sister, Carrie, hesitated, the chief simply stood and waited patiently until she finally stepped down from the wagon and greeted him as well. Then he asked about the little girl who had been with them before. When Philura's father pointed out Cousin Florence, the chief walked over and greeted her personally before moving on. The family realized he had remembered every one of them. Before leaving, the chief told Philura's father where elk could be found drinking at sunrise. He described the location in remarkable detail. A nearby soldier explained why this meeting mattered. According to him, this was one of the most influential Sioux leaders in the region. Having earned his respect could prove valuable. Other emigrants warned Philura's father not to trust the directions. They feared it was a trap. Her father disagreed. He believed the chief had dealt honestly with them. The next morning, he followed the directions exactly. The chief had told the truth. He found the spring, harvested an elk, and returned safely to camp. Philura later reflected that the family had received far more than a meal in return. They had earned the respect of someone whose goodwill mattered on the trail. Because Philura's memories were preserved, we can still glimpse one small moment from 1864, a meal shared between strangers that became an act of mutual respect, remembered for a lifetime.